Welcome to MOOC e-learning lecture session. Today I will discuss on the topic problem of inflation in India in post-pandemic period. COVID-19 related stimulus spending in all the major economies and emerging economies along with pent-up demand boosting consumer spending pushed the inflation to a certain height. The surge in energy, non-food commodities, input prices, supply constraints, disruption of global supply chains, and rising freight cost across the globe stoked the global inflation massively. Crude oil price also witnessed an upswing during the year on the back of increased demand from recovering economy and supply restrictions by the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and its allies, shortly abbreviated as OPEC. Now we will discuss about what is the connectivity between price and inflation. If we take a look on the domestic front, the average headline consumer price index inflation combined, in short abbreviation, it is pronounced as CPI-C. This inflation in India moderated to 5.2% in 2021-22 during the period April to December from 6.6% in the corresponding period of 2022 and 21, and it was recorded as 5.6% in December 2021. The consumer price index inflation remained range bound as food price eased considerably due to the supply management response by the government. Food inflation remained benign during the year at 2.9% during the period April to December as against 9.5% in the corresponding period last year. In case of vegetables, price of onions and potatoes remained under control almost, though retail prices of tomatoes witnessed an uptick during the period September to November in 2021 due to untimely rain in major producing states. However, with fresh arrival in the market in December, the retail price of tomatoes are showing signs of easing and price gradually falls down. While seasonality plays an important role in case of the vegetables, random shocks like rains have a severe impact on their availability as well as price. On the other hand, a strong network of cold storage chains well supported by the effective transport infrastructure is needed to stabilize the price of such perishable commodities. Effective supply side management kept prices of most of the essential commodity under control during this period. Proactive measures were taken to contain the price rise in pulses and edible oils that reported high inflation, reflecting the impact of imported inflation in these commodities. Reduction in central government excise duty and subsequent cuts in price also play a great role to easier the price of the commodities. Now we will discuss about the term inflation. Inflation means paying more for goods than the consumer was paying earlier. The price of everything as goes up on time, so this phenomena is referred as inflation. Due to increase in overall price, each unit of currency generally buys fewer amounts of goods and services. As a result, inflation reflects a decrease in the purchasing power of a unit of money. Now we will focus on the topic trend on domestic inflation. How far domestic inflation have been affected during the pandemic situation. Let us have a look on the retail inflation. Retail inflation as measured by the consumer price index combined, as already pointed out, which were slightly above 6% in 2020 to 21, owing to supply chain disruption caused by the COVID-19 restriction, lockdowns, curfews during the current financial year. Retail inflation during the period 2021-22 within the period April to December stood at 5.2%. Wholesale inflation based on the wholesale price index, after remaining a constant, it started gradually showed a sharp peak during the period 2021-22 within April to December. A part of the observed rise in wholesale price index simply shows that it is the main reason due to why does the wholesale price index has increased severely, because of rising input price, rising input cost, and global commodity price also contributed to a rise in the wholesale price index. Let us have a look on the table, general inflation based on different price indices. Here we have compared with the wholesale price index CPI core and CPI IW stands for industrial workers, CPI agricultural workers, CPI rural workers. It is very interesting to note that during the period 2020 and 21, the agricultural laborer and rural laborer was mostly affected, which the as indicated by our figure and supported also. Look that during the period 2020-21 denoted by the hat sign, within the period April to December, it almost agricultural laborer, the indices shows the inflation rate goes to 7%, which is very unfortunate. Also for the rural laborers, it becomes 6.8%. Similarly, when we have look after 1 year, that is within the period 2021 and 2022, considering the same time period, April to December, look that it drastically falls. Means that during the COVID pandemic situation, agricultural laborer and rural laborer were more distressed situation. The average retail inflation, which was earlier 4.8% in 2019 and 20, it inched up to a height 6.2% in 2021 on account of COVID-19 supply chain disruptions and stalled economic activity due to the prolonged lockdown. Since July 2021, retail inflation well within the tolerance band of targeted limit at 4% plus minus 2 percentage points set by the government during the period April 1, 2021 to March 31st, 2026. This is the targeted period. Average retail inflation in 2021-22 within the period April to December has declined to the rate 5.2% as against 6.6% during April to December within the period 2020-21. Again, it comes down 5.5% in 2021-22. So, the decline in average retail inflation was led by the easing of food inflation. As food inflation gradually falls down, its common impact directly hits the retail inflation of our economy. Food inflation, as measured by the Consumer Price Index, averaged a low of 2.9% in the year 2021-22 within the period April to December, as against 9.1% in the corresponding period last year. Food inflation also declined between July and September in the year 2021. It increased to 4% in December 2021. During the current financial year, retail core inflation, if we take a measure, which inflation if we exclude the food and beverage as well as fuel and light, these are the transitory component of the inflation. If we exclude in the calculation of retail core inflation these two components, then we can easily found a rising trend. Average core inflation for the period April to December in 2021 stood at 5.9% as against 5.4% in the corresponding period and remained below 6% during last few months. This is the table where I have clearly indicated inflation of selected groups of CPI based. Here, if we have a look, very interesting result we practically get. Look that during the period 2020-21, within the period April to December, what is the inflation rate of oil, milk product? Look that oil reached 30.9%, most highest inflation we commonly found. Fuel and light, it also inched up 12.2%. Again, the interesting thing is that in case of egg, milk product, food and beverage, everything correspondingly rises. But when we have a look to the period next year, 2020-21-22, covering the same period April to December, we easily found a decline in price trend. First, we will check in case of oils, it reduces to 25.9%, which was earlier almost 31%. This is very interesting figure. Again, now we will discuss in 2021, what was the, during the pandemic period, what was the inflation, as if we have calculated here monthly basis inflation and yearly basis inflation, and provided also a supplementary picture of graphs of both types of inflation. Very interesting and emerging result we find during the pre-COVID situation, which started during the period April 2020, inflation starts its peak and its reflection is also reflected in CPI inflation during the same period. I have also calculated, look the monthly expenditure, monthly inflation rate and yearly basis inflation rate. Look that during the period April 2020, if we look that April 2020 to April 2019, the inflation rate becomes almost 5.45%. And on the left panel, every monthly inflation has been calculated. That is March 20 to April 20, April to May 20, every month-wise how inflation rate gradually increases. We get a trend, and simultaneously we have compared its annual trends. Now, if we decompose what factors are basically responsible for COVID pandemic situation, let's have a look. There are three components. We have easily identified it. Firstly, personal care, and the yellow column indicates the health expenditure. Next, transport and communication expenditure. The most interesting point which we have to observe here, that transport and communication inflation has been rising continuously and has arrived at 8.6% weightage in the overall consumer price inflation. What is the basic main reason behind it? The main reason behind it is that public has started using the private transport rather than the public transport during the pandemic situation. Personal care also affected the inflation rate with a rise of 3.9% due to increased rise in gold. As the gold price increases, personal care also affected, is utmostly affected, which is also indicated here. Health inflation is the next severe component of CPI, Consumer Price Index. Health inflation looked at. Health inflation has 5.9% weightage in the CPI, has remained increased from 2.5% in April to 5.2% in October 2020. It has been increased more than 4% during the last 6 months. The CPI inflation rate, that is Consumer Price Index inflation, has increased gradually due to the food inflation, while pandemic has also resulted in higher retail inflation. Inflation naturally has remained high for two components, two commodity groups. What are those? One is health and another is transport and communication. Now, we have to discuss about the trends in wholesale price index based inflation. WPI inflation during the current financial year, in contrast to the trend observed in CPI core inflation, has shown a rising trend and remained almost high. WPI inflation has meaning during the period 2020-21 and 2019-20, while being moderate or low in the preceding period. WPI inflation has been higher in the current financial year compared to the previous year in almost three major groups. It was above 20% in fuel and power group, reflecting the high international petroleum price, as we have earlier mentioned. Within the primary article groups and crude petroleum and natural gas subgroup has also witnessed very high inflation and stood about 55.7% in December 2021. Minerals has witnessed high inflation throughout the year, and impact of rising international price in WPI manufacturing was clearly visible, especially in manufacture of basic metals. Within the manufactured food products, edible oil were a major contributor during this period. Now, we have to take a look between what is the causes of divergence between WPI and CPI based inflation rate. The year-on-year inflation rate was calculated based on WPI index and CPI-C has been recorded a greater divergence since June 2019. Between June 2019 and February 2021, wholesale inflation was lower than the retail inflation, while between the period March 2021 and December 2021, the reverse case occurs. That is, wholesale inflation remains above the retail inflation. WPI inflation during the current period was higher than CPI because there was also a significant widening of the divergence. In December 2021, WPI based inflation rate was 8 percentage points higher than the retail inflation. This trend raises a natural question: what is the basic cause between such kind of divergence? Consequent to the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, the productive activity remained muted in 2020-21 for a prolonged period, and global crude prices also reached records low due to lack of demand. Therefore, WPI based index rate touched a low rate of 1.3% in the year 2020-21. With economic activity started to picking up in the year 2021-22 and edging up of global crude oil prices, the low base of 2020-21 led to WPI inflation reaching a peak level of 14.2% in the year November 2021, and the figure reaches to 12.5% almost during the period April to December in the year 2021. On the other hand, very notable thing is that retail inflation that had remained high during the period 2020-21 due to supply chain disruption and high food inflation moderated in 2021-22 on account of effective supply side management, resulting in a divergence between WPI and CPI based inflation rate. This is the main reason. Let us have a look on the global commodity price and domestic inflation. International commodity price also surged highly, very high in price was occurred during second half of 2020-21. Fluctuation has been more in case of the energy prices. After registering the negative growth during the period COVID-19 period, the energy index had recorded triple-digit growth in 5 out of 20 months since the period January 2021. Now, we will mention about the steps, what steps have been taken by the government to augment the essential supply during the pandemic situation. The government has undertaken several measures in price of essential commodities like pulse, onion, and government has taken initiative to create a buffer stock to ensure effective intervention during price rise. Through utilization of buffer stock, the government has procured pulses in the year 2020-21 and 2021-22 from farmers producers organization. The target is also high. Import, next we will focus on the import policy. To augment the domestic availability of pulses, tur and wood are kept under free import category till 31st March 2021. Basic import duty on agricultural infrastructure and development cess on Mosur have been brought down to 0 and 10% respectively. This is the basic steps taken by the government. In case of edible oil, to soften or to less amount of to rise the from the high rise to make it bring down the fall in price of edible oil, the duty on edible oil has been reduced, will effect from 14th October 2021. to soften the price of edible oil, the basic duty on refined palm oil, refined soybean oil, refined sunflower oil has also reduced to 17.5%, which was earlier 32.5% with effect from 14th October 2021. The Department of Food and Public Distribution has imposed stock limit on edible oil and oil seeds for a period up to 31st March 2022. Removal of licensing requirement, stock limit, movement restriction, specified food stuffs has been issued with effect from 8th October 2021. These are the basic policy structure taken by the government to procure the essential commodities during pandemic situation.